think you mentioned in one of your client meetings, and we've discussed the sort of hotel management aspect of the co-working, that you think that office buildings will be managed in some cases by hotel operators. Again, to go down the route of offering your customer, not your employee, a different experience. I thought that was fascinating, and I don't know if you've got any specific examples, or you've been to some of these buildings.
Well, actually, this is a trend I was talking about in the first edition of Your Space that we launched back in 2018, pre-pandemic. As part of the roadshow of that research, I went to Australia and looked at some of the best-in-class workplaces down there. And actually, our own building in Australia, owned by AMP Capital, has gone through a pretty rigorous refurbishment. But central to that refurbishment is AMP have done a deal with Accor Hotels to manage the ground floor plane of the building. So reception, concierge, co-working hub, event space, cafe, all run by a hotelier to give a different vibe and a different experience to the users. And not just incidentally the users that are committed to floors, but people coming in off the street as well, the footfall point. So there are examples, but they're reasonably limited at the moment. I'm absolutely convinced that we need to create office space that has a very strong service layer and creates a human experience, rather than perhaps what has been the traditional focus of creating really solidly stunning designed buildings, bricks and mortar, but actually leaving people to just get on with filling it and using it how they wish. I think we need to push harder on that point, and I think that does play to the so-called hotelification of the office. What's interesting is the attitude of different investors and landlords to that. So I've actually seen, as part of our wealth report work, we've talked about this in the past, that private investors who often are quite exposed to the hotel space are actually starting to think maybe we can take the skills and learning from that and apply it to reposition and refurbishment opportunities in office markets. Some of the more fluid and flexible and footloose investors who tend to be at the front end of trends, they've started to go in this direction. Some of the funds are a bit more challenged by it, of course, because it's OPEX and it's operating platforms and building new skill sets.
Outside their comfort zone.
Yeah, they don't generally hold the sorts of skill sets internally that you would like to see, but I think that's coming.
Last question.
Yeah.
What's going to be the major theme in next year's publication that we haven't discussed today?
Well, I haven't set the survey yet, but the survey will be consistent with what we've done before. I think there are a couple, actually. So the first one is pace of change. So to my point earlier, I think we are in a little bit of a hiatus at the moment where occupiers are still trying to glean signals from their workforce about what comes next and then bring that into play. I think by the time we do the survey, end of this year, beginning of next, I think we'll have momentum in the markets. I think it'll have a slightly different tone. And then I think the conversation is about that service layer piece and about how do you create the experience, what works, what doesn't. And I think there's also a really interesting conversation to be had about what are next level amenities. We have talked about amenity provision in office buildings for some time now. We know that well-being is a huge agenda item for corporate leaders, but also their staff. People want to be looked after, they want to take care of themselves and be taken care of. And I think offices can provide amenities to support that from both a mental and a physical well-being perspective. But I actually think there's an interesting frontier emerging as well here. One of the challenges that most businesses are facing up to is a war for talent. The ability to find good people, particularly with tech and creative skill sets, is proving quite difficult wherever you are in the world, pretty much. And as a result, I think you are going to see occupiers, certainly the larger occupiers to start with, beginning to think about how can we grow our own talent, which leads them to upskilling and reskilling agendas and leads them to lifelong learning and flexible learning. And I think the next frontier of well-being, therefore, is developmental welfare and well-being. How do we take people and advance them and develop them in conjunction with them? And what that points to in the office of the future, I think, is more bleacher space, more town hall spaces where informal learning can take place, classroom type facilities, that sort of stuff. I think that's going to be the next frontier. And in delivering that, final point, but in delivering that, I think that makes the office in a new world of work particularly attractive to all generations. because everybody's going to be charged with developing themselves. And actually, if the office is the place where you go to be developed, that can only help the footfall, can't it?
Brilliant. Thank you, Lee.
My pleasure.
Fascinating.
Great to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you here. And we look forward to the next publication and having you back. Thanks for your time.
Look forward to it too. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Humphrey.